Hello friends, welcome to this beginner-friendly tutorial on JavaScript comparison operators. Today we'll explore how JavaScript compares values and returns results that are either true or false. Understanding these operators is essential for writing code that makes decisions. Whether you're new to programming or just brushing up, this video will guide you step by step. Let's dive in and see how comparison operators work in JavaScript, starting with the basics and moving through practical example. By the end, you'll know how to use these operators confidently in your own projects. Comparison operators are special symbols in JavaScript that compare two values. When you use them, the result is always either true or false. These operators help your code make decisions, such as checking if one value is equal to another or if one number is bigger than another. You'll see them used in many places, especially in conditions and loops. Let's look at each operator and see how they work with simple examples. We'll start with the most common one, the equal to operator. Equal to operator, written as double equals equals equals, checks if two values are the same. For example, if you have let a 10 and let b equals 10, then a equals equals b will return true because both values are equal. This operator is useful when you want to see if two variables hold the same value. It's important to note that equals equals compares values, not types, so sometimes it can return true even if the types are different. Let's see how this works in a simple code example. Let's look at a practical example. In JavaScript, you can write let a equals 10, let b equals 10, and then console log a equals b. This code checks if a and b are equal. Since both are 10, the output will be true. This is a simple way to compare numbers or other values in your code. You'll often use this operator when you need to check if something matches, like user input or data from a database. Not equal operator, written as equals, checks if two values are different. If the values are not the same, it returns true. For instance, let x equals 10, let y equals 5. Equals y will return true because 10 and 5 are not equal. This operator is handy when you want to make sure two things are not the same, such as checking if a user's input is incorrect or if two items are different. Here's a simple example using the not equal operator. In JavaScript, let x equals 10, let y equals 5, equals y. This checks if x and y are different. Since 10 is not equal to 5, the output is true. You'll use this operator often when you want to make sure two values are not the same, such as checking passwords or comparing data. Greater than operator, written as, checks if one value is larger than another. For example, console log xy will return true if x is greater than y. In our earlier example, x is 10 and y is 5, so 10, 5 is true. This operator is useful for comparing numbers such as scores, prices, or ages. It helps your code decide if something is bigger or smaller. Let's see the greater than operator in action. With let x equals 10, let y equals 5, console log xy, the code checks if x is greater than y. Since 10 is greater than 5, the output is true. This operator is often used in situations like checking if a score is high enough or if a value exceeds a certain limit. Less than operator, written as, checks if one value is smaller than another. For example, console log xy will return true if x is less than y. In our example, x is 10 and y is 5, so 10, 5 is false. This operator is useful for comparing numbers to see if something is below a certain value. Let's look at the less than operator in a code example. With let x equals 10, let y equals 5, console log xy, the code checks if x is less than y. Since 10 is not less than 5, the output is false. You'll use this operator when you want to check if a value is below a certain threshold, like age limits or minimum requirements. Greater than or equal to operator, written as equals, checks if one value is greater than or equal to another. For example, console log x greater or equal y will return true if x is greater than or equal to y. This operator is useful when you want to include the boundary value in your comparison, such as checking if someone is old enough or if a score meets the minimum requirement. Let's see how the greater than or equal to operator works. With let x equals 10, let y equals 5, console log x greater or equal y, the code checks if x is greater than or equal to y. Since 10 is greater than 5, the output is true. You'll use this operator when you want to check if a value meets or exceeds a certain limit. Less than or equal to operator, written as less or equal, checks if one value is less than or equal to another. For example, console log x less or equal y will return true if x is less than or equal to y. This operator is useful for checking if a value is within a certain range, such as age restrictions or maximum limits. See the less than or equal to operator in action. With let x equals 10, let y equals 5, console log x less or equal y, the code checks if x is less than or equal to y. Since 10 is not less than or equal to 5, the output is false. This operator is often used to check if a value stays within a limit, like maximum allowed values. Every comparison operator in JavaScript returns either true or false. This makes it easy to use them in conditions such as if statements or loops. When you compare values, your code can decide what to do next based on the result. Understanding how these results work is key to writing effective programs. Comparison operators are often used in conditions to control the flow of your program. For example, you might use them in an if statement to check if a value meets a certain requirement. If the comparison returns true, your code can perform an action. If it returns false, it can do something else. This is how you make decisions in your code. Loops in JavaScript also use comparison operators to decide when to stop or continue. For example, a for loop might check if a counter is less than a maximum value. As long as the comparison returns true, the loop keeps running. When it returns false, the loop stops. This is a powerful way to repeat actions in your code. Functions often use comparison operators to check values and return results. For example, you might write a function that checks if a number is greater than another and returns true or false. This makes your code reusable and helps you build more complex programs. Comparison operators are a key part of making functions work. When you build interactive web pages, you often need to compare user input with expected values. For example, you might check if a password matches or if a number is within a valid range. Comparison operators make it easy to validate input and provide feedback to users. This is an important part of web development. In processing data, comparison operators help you filter, sort, and analyze information. For example, you might check if a value meets certain criteria before adding it to a list. This makes your code more efficient and helps you work with large amounts of data. Comparison operators are essential for data-driven applications. Web development relies heavily on comparison operators. Whether you're building forms, validating input, or creating interactive features, these operators help your code make decisions. They are used in almost every part of a web application, from user authentication to displaying content based on conditions. Games often use comparison operators to check scores, levels, and player actions. For example, you might check if a player's score is high enough to win or if a character's health is below a certain level. These operators make games interactive and responsive to player input. Decision-making in programming relies on comparison operators. They help your code choose between different actions based on values. For example, you might decide to show a message if a condition is true or hide it if false. This is how you create dynamic and flexible programs. Sorting data often uses comparison operators to decide the order of items. For example, you might compare numbers to sort them from smallest to largest. This is a common task in programming and helps you organize information efficiently. Filtering data uses comparison operators to select items that meet certain criteria. For example, you might filter a list to show only values greater than a threshold. This helps you focus on relevant information and ignore the rest. Searching for values in data often uses comparison operators. For example, you might check if a value matches a search term or if it meets certain conditions. This makes it easy to find information quickly and accurately. Validation checks if data meets certain requirements using comparison operators. For example, you might check if an email address is valid or if a number is within a range. This helps ensure your data is correct and reliable. Security features often use comparison operators to check passwords, access levels, and permissions. For example, you might compare a user's input with a stored password to allow access. This is a critical part of keeping your application safe. Analytics uses comparison operators to analyze data and find trends. For example, you might check if sales are higher than last month or if a value exceeds a target. This helps you make informed decisions based on data. Automation uses comparison operators to trigger actions based on values. For example, you might automate a task if a condition is met or stop it if not. This makes your programs more efficient and responsive. Error checking uses comparison operators to detect problems in your code. For example, you might check if a value is out of range or if something is missing. This helps you catch errors early and fix them quickly. Testing your code often involves comparison operators. For example, you might check if a function returns the expected value or if a condition is met. This helps you make sure your code works correctly. Reporting uses comparison operators to generate summaries and insights. For example, you might compare values to highlight differences or show progress. This helps you communicate results clearly. Communication between parts of your program often uses comparison operators. For example, you might check if a message should be sent or if a value needs updating. This keeps your code organized and efficient. Collaboration in coding projects often involves comparison operators. For example, you might check if changes are needed or if values match across different files. This helps teams work together smoothly. Optimization uses comparison operators to improve performance. For example, you might check if a process is faster or if a value is more efficient. This helps you make your code run better and use resources wisely. Monitoring uses comparison operators to track values and detect changes. For example, you might check if a value goes above or below a threshold. This helps you keep your applications running smoothly. Maintenance uses comparison operators to check if updates are needed or if values are correct. For example, you might compare current values with expected ones to ensure everything is working. This keeps your code reliable and up to date. Documentation often explains how comparison operators work and when to use them. Clear documentation helps you understand the purpose of each operator and how to apply them in your code. This is important for learning and sharing knowledge. Learning about comparison operators is a key step in mastering JavaScript. Practice using them in different situations to build your skills. The more you use comparison operators, the more confident you'll become in writing code that makes decisions. In real projects, comparison operators help you solve problems and create solutions. Whether you're building a website, a game, or a data tool, these operators are always useful. Try using them in your own projects to see how they make your code smarter. Practice is the best way to learn comparison operators. Try writing code that uses each operator and see how the results change. Experiment with different values and conditions to understand how comparisons work in JavaScript. Let's review what we've learned. Comparison operators in JavaScript include equal to equals, not equal to equals, greater than or equal to equals, and less than or equal to less or equal. Each operator helps your code make decisions by comparing values and returning true or false. These are essential tools for any programmer. Comparison operators are very important in JavaScript. They are used in conditions, decision-making, and many other parts of programming. Understanding how to use them will help you write better code and build more powerful applications. In the next video, we'll learn about if-else statements in JavaScript. These statements use comparison operators to make decisions and control the flow of your program. Stay tuned to continue your journey in learning JavaScript and building interactive web applications.